Get on your knees. Her voice was shaky, but every word hit like a blade through silence. Lois Nadean Smith held a .22 caliber handgun tightly, her focus locked on Cindy Baillee, a 21-year-old woman, bruised, terrified, and sat frozen on the trailer floor in Gans, Oklahoma. It was July 4th, 1982. Earlier that day, Lois, her son Greg, and a woman named Teresa Baker had picked Cindy up from a motel in Tahlequah. Now, surrounded by people she once considered friends, Cindy's desperate cries went unanswered. Standing behind Lois was Greg Smith, her only son, silently witnessing what was happening. That day marked the end of Cindy's life. Her killer wasn't some unknown criminal. She was a 45-year-old mother, driven by obsession and revenge. This wasn't random. It was deliberate, personal, and deeply cruel. Lois didn't just take Cindy's life. She humiliated and tortured her. She humiliated her emotionally, cutting her hair and watching her suffer, feeding on the fear in Cindy's eyes. All of it was triggered by a rumor that Cindy had informed police about Greg's drug activity. No one knew for sure if it was true, but Lois had already decided it was a betrayal deserving death. Greg never stepped in. He stood by, watching his mother spiral. Later, he would testify against her, shattering whatever bond they once had and leaving behind a chilling legacy. Lois spent the next 20 years fighting her death sentence, claiming the killing was a drunken mistake. But the evidence and her son's testimony painted a different picture. This is the story of Lois Nadean Smith. She was born on September 12, 1940, to William Ray Dodd and Dolly Tennyson Dodd, most likely in the northeastern part of Oklahoma. She grew up with at least one sibling, her brother Phineas Ray Dodd, in a family tied closely to the area. Although records don't confirm which school she attended, yearbooks from the late 1940s and early 1950s mention girls named Nadine in nearby towns, suggesting she likely went to a local rural high school. In that tight-knit world, she developed a reputation, even earning the nickname Mean Nane. That name would resurface years later during her trial and in media reports, echoing her temper and fierce nature from childhood well into adulthood. She married and took on the names Dodd and then Smith, likely after her marriage to Greg Smith's father. By age 45, Lois had become a well-known figure in her small Sallisaw area town, not for kindness, but for her intimidating presence and fiery attitude. She lived in a rundown trailer, often in the company of heavy drinkers and fellow strugglers. Her life wasn't easy, but she had one thing she lived for: her son, Gregory. He was her everything. To Lois, protecting him came before anything, even the law. So when rumors started circulating about Greg's involvement in drug sales and stolen weapons, Lois didn't hesitate. She went into defense mode. Anyone she thought might pose a threat to him was already marked. Gregory Smith, born sometime around 1963 or 1964, was 18 when everything unfolded on that Independence Day. That morning, he and his mother picked Cindy Baillee up from a motel outside of Tahlequah. The reason, some claimed, was retaliation. Cindy had allegedly made threats toward Greg. Cindy, just 21, had led a troubled life. She was attractive but lived in chaos, moving through Tulsa's rougher corners, caught up in drugs and broken relationships. Her brief connection with Greg had been unstable at best, fueled by pills, arguments, and poor decisions. When she tried to pull away, a rumor emerged. People said she had talked to the police about Greg's crimes. No one could confirm it, but to Lois, it didn't matter. The very idea of betrayal was enough. Lois never trusted Cindy. She saw her as manipulative, reckless, and dangerous. That gossip was the final straw. Lois became fixated, watching, ranting, boiling with rage. She told friends Cindy needed to be taught a lesson. And while few took her seriously, Lois meant every word. That same morning, Cindy checked out of her motel, unaware that she was being followed. Lois, Greg, and Teresa pulled up in a car, asking her to talk, maybe settle things. Despite the tension, Cindy agreed to go with them. Some say she still had feelings for Greg. Others believe she was simply trying to avoid conflict. Either way, she got in the car. As they drove down the quiet Oklahoma roads, the atmosphere shifted. The car grew silent. Lois turned toward Cindy and started pressing her with questions. Then came the accusations. Fast, intense, relentless. At some point, something inside Lois snapped. She reached over and began strangling Cindy right there in the vehicle. Rage overwhelmed her. In the chaos, Lois pulled out a knife and stabbed Cindy in the throat. But she didn't die right away. Instead of calling for help or leaving her somewhere, they kept driving. Their destination, Gans, a quiet rural town where Lois's ex-husband lived. They didn't stop. The car kept moving toward Gans. When they arrived at the house, Cindy was weak, injured, and clearly terrified. Lois led her inside without any pause. That's where the situation became even more violent. Inside, Lois pulled out a .22 caliber pistol and fired multiple times, striking Cindy in the upper body and head. As the gun ran empty, Greg stepped in, not to stop it, but to hand her more bullets. She kept firing. Cindy eventually collapsed from the injuries. In a final burst of uncontrolled rage, she climbed on top of Cindy and stomped on her neck. This wasn't just a killing. It was personal. It was brutal. It was a message. The woman known in her community as Mean Nain had made up her mind. Cindy wasn't going to survive, and nothing would get in the way of that decision. Cindy Baillee had vanished on July 4th. When she didn't return to the motel or check in with her friends or family, people got worried quickly. She told several people who she was leaving with that day. Many remembered seeing her get into a car with Lois Smith, her ex-boyfriend Greg, and another woman. Some even described the make and color of the vehicle. At first, no one imagined that would be the last time Cindy would be seen alive. But the next day, her body was discovered inside the home of Lois's ex-husband, deep in rural Gans. In a small town like that, word spread fast even before the internet. Locals whispered. Some had heard gunshots that day. One neighbor told authorities he saw a car matching Lois's outside the house. Another said they'd heard a woman scream. When police entered the house, they found a scene that clearly showed signs of a violent struggle. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This wasn't random. It was deliberate and vicious. It didn't take long for investigators to identify their suspects. All the evidence pointed toward Lois and Greg. Eyewitness accounts placed them with Cindy. The physical evidence backed it up, and neither of them denied it. When officers questioned them, Lois gave a straightforward answer. Yes, I shot her. She was going to have my son killed. I couldn't let that happen. Greg, just 18 at the time, admitted to being there too. He confessed to handing his mother the bullets as she continued firing. The murder weapon, a .22 caliber revolver, was recovered along with shell casings and clothing soaked in blood. There was no need for a long investigation or forensic delays. Lois confessed, Greg cooperated, and within 48 hours, the case had unraveled completely. It became one of the fastest homicide arrests Sequoyah County had ever seen. From the moment Cindy's body was found, the case was practically closed. Everything pointed in one direction, and it didn't take long for the state to file charges. State of Oklahoma versus Lois Nadean Smith. The trial kicked off in 1983. It started as a local story, but quickly caught attention across Oklahoma. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution came armed with what they described as a clear, undeniable case. There was no mystery about who pulled the trigger. Lois herself had admitted to it. But what the prosecution really wanted to show the jury was that this wasn't just an act of rage. It was carefully planned. They argued that Lois had mapped out every step, from convincing Cindy to get into the car, to attacking her along the drive, to finishing what she started in that house in Gans. Prosecutors described the crime scene in detail. A wounded young woman, cornered and helpless in a recliner, shot over and over again. Her injuries were detailed in court: multiple gunshot wounds, serious trauma, and signs of intense violence. One shot had been fired at extremely close range. The lead prosecutor called it exactly what it was: an execution, disguised as a mother protecting her child. Witnesses came forward to describe how fiercely Lois guarded her son. Others shared how much she disliked Cindy, especially in the weeks leading up to the murder. Friends talked about the growing tension, the threats, and the way Lois would rant about Cindy. One even remembered her saying she wished Cindy would just disappear. Then there was the nickname, Mean Nain. It wasn't just brought up in court for effect. It became part of the state's case. Former classmates who were now adults took the stand and confirmed that Lois had always been that way: aggressive, short-tempered, and unforgiving when she felt wronged. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman who had spent her life controlling others, and when she felt her power slipping, she snapped. Meanwhile, the defense chose a different strategy. They didn't deny that Lois had killed Cindy. Instead, they argued it was out of fear, not hate. Yes, they said, she fired the shots, but she did it because she believed her son's life was in danger. The defense claimed that Cindy had threatened Greg and may have had ties to dangerous people. Lois, they argued, acted out of desperation, not cruelty. They emphasized that she had no criminal history. She wasn't a cold-blooded killer, just a mother who made a horrible decision while trying to protect her only child. Greg also took the stand. His words were conflicted. He admitted to being in the room, to handing her the ammunition, and to not doing anything to stop the shooting. But he also said he believed Cindy was dangerous, and that his mother acted out of fear. Still, none of it changed the evidence and no attempt to get help or flee. The medical examiner made it clear Cindy's death wasn't quick or painless. It was prolonged, violent, and intentional. And perhaps most telling of all, Lois never tried to cover it up. When asked by detectives why she did it, she simply said, "I wasn't going to let her hurt my boy." The defense argued that Cindy had threatened Greg's life, claiming she had connections to dangerous people and that Lois had acted out of desperation, not cruelty. They highlighted Lois's clean record, saying she was a mother who panicked, not a killer by nature. According to them, what happened was tragic, yes, but rooted in fear, not hatred. The medical examiner was clear. This was a prolonged, deliberate killing. And perhaps the most damning fact? Lois never tried to run. She didn't hide the crime. When questioned, she looked investigators in the eye and said, "I shot her. I wasn't going to let her hurt my boy." The trial reached its peak during closing arguments. Prosecutors called it vigilante justice, driven by fury. They warned that if personal judgment were enough to justify murder, no one would be safe. Laws, they argued, must be based on facts, not suspicion. And the facts were undeniable. Lois had lured Cindy into a car, tormented her, and ended her life. The jury needed only a few hours to reach a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence was clear: death by lethal injection. Lois showed no visible emotion, no tears, no breakdown. Greg stood trial separately. He was also found guilty of first-degree murder as an accomplice. His demeanor in court was quiet, distant, as though the weight of it hadn't fully set in. He was sentenced to life in prison with a chance of parole. He served 27 years and was released in 2009. And just like that, the trial was over. The cameras left. The public moved on. But the legacy of Mean Nain was just beginning its next chapter, one that would stretch across the next 18 years. Lois Nadean Smith began her long wait on death row, writing, appealing, and praying, while the memory of Cindy Baillee lived on only in photographs and the grief of those she left behind. Now, Lois entered the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, a middle-aged woman sentenced to die. But execution wouldn't come quickly. Nearly 2 decades passed as she remained locked away in the women's unit at Mabel Bassett Correctional Center. Outside, life moved forward. Inside, time stood still. Her legal team filed motion after motion, challenging the trial. They argued that the constant use of her nickname, Mean Nain, created bias, that her confession wasn't properly handled, that lethal injection would be cruel and excessive. Each challenge was struck down. The Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals reviewed and upheld the verdict. Federal courts did the same. Even the U.S. The Supreme Court declined to intervene. Then, on December 4, 2001, after 19 years of legal battles, the process reached its end. Lois walked into the execution chamber calmly. Her face was blank as witnesses. Attorneys, a chaplain, and Cindy's family looked on. The medical team inserted the IVs. At 9:13 p.m., the drugs began to flow. By 9:21 p.m., it was over. She was pronounced dead. In her final moments, facing the family of the woman she had killed, Lois spoke softly. "I'm sorry for the pain and loss I've caused. Please forgive me. You must forgive to be forgiven. Thank you, Jesus." She quoted scripture, appearing calm and full of remorse. But no final words could undo what had been done. Her last meal was modest: barbecue ribs, onion rings, strawberry banana cake, and cherry lemonade. a small comfort before everything ended. There was no resistance, no outburst, just a quiet end to a life shaped by obsession and control. Her execution brought closure, but not peace, because the real questions still hang in the air. Can regret undo the past? Can an apology bring true healing? For Cindy Baillee, justice came far too late. Her life ended in a trailer, stripped of dignity, silenced by a mother's twisted sense of love. Lois Nadean Smith's story is a haunting reminder. When love turns into control, it can destroy everything in its path, leaving behind a silence that never fully fades. Let us know your thoughts. Was justice served? Could this have been prevented? If you found this case compelling, make sure to subscribe to Crime Shade for more true crime documentaries every single week. Hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and turn on the bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, stay sharp, stay thoughtful, and stay safe.